cryptocurrencies ever replace real money?
Potentially the end game for me, potentially. Could you have a parallel period for a substantial time frame? Yes. As I mentioned, we don't have price stability on cryptos because of its valuation change. So in terms of its life stage cycle, and I think there's quite a bit more of this to take place, as part of shepherding everybody into that game, we will have further expansion in there. Thereafter, we're going to probably have a more balanced and more drifting, like a floating currency system, which will then make them more comparable. It's very difficult to have as a medium of exchange something that changes value too far too often, both in an upside and a downside direction. So it's now a speculator's tool, it's the early adopters, and there's a lot of technical development going on. Later on, a lot of that will settle down, and once a lot more of the money has passed in that wants to go and there's more clear free flow, there will be a more natural balance to it. So I think it could potentially replace, but I would certainly also expect there's many old school people, there's a lot of pensioners, a lot of people that are very off-grid with all things web. You'd need to have both systems running for a sustained period.
Will Bitcoin be widely used within the UK and the US, do you think?
I think its use will proliferate.
And China and Asia or Africa, do you think?
I think in some senses even faster in some of those countries you mentioned. So China, particularly where they have a very draconian governmental system, we've seen immense support for Bitcoin, and then subsequently for Ethereum. The amount that you could take out through Ethereum was actually higher, and many people attribute some of Ethereum's overperformance to the Chinese and also to a degree Korea, although that could also be a proxy for China as well. So it's fascinating.
And why is that? Is that because their currencies can be a bit more manipulated, or?
It's not about so much their currency, it's about the fact that they can't really hold money offshore. They're quite controlled in terms of where they can hold assets. And they don't want to fall under, like anybody else, the jurisdiction of a very powerful, very draconian government. So they seek to have money offshore. And Bitcoin has been a means of getting wealth outside of the country's boundaries. So it's a freedom, it's a liberty, it's an act of liberty of escaping an overreaching government.
Do you think the success of Bitcoin or any kind of cryptocurrency could indirectly lead to the demise of currency?
Longer run, I think we're going to have a long generation of parallel running with eventual potential death of the currency system. That said, there's an economic crash that can occur at any point, and this is probably going to be a big knobbling effect for fiat currencies, and it could be a massive enabler for cryptos. We could get that first step where, wow, this is a viable alternative. So there's going to be lockstep quantum leaps, and then there's going to be sustained periods of trundling along, and then there'll be another leap, and then slowly everybody will look around, and most people that are now electronic and have electronic devices will think, I don't need the other. I mean, people carry a lot less cash on them now. People go travel on the tube with their cards and everything. So we are going electronic.
Will the governments allow this to continue? Do you think that they will become fearful of having the control taken away from them if they don't have the centralised banks anymore, if everything's operating in the ether with Bitcoin, etc.?
I think there's a big game that is all in play. I don't think the governments like it, but they recognise that it's a technology that's not going to go away. I think they're going to try contain and control. So the way they'll try grab is pinch at the exchanges, the hubs. They'll oblige certain fiduciary requirements that they place on brokers, on exchanges. In other words, to know their client, no source of money, only return money to the same funding account, etc., so that they will say they combat money laundering and criminal events. So they'll sell that as doing good by us and making sure everybody pays their fair share in income tax. But I do think it's all about control. So I think there's going to be that. They're going to punch the nodes and the hubs. They might not be able to control what goes on in the crypto realm, but if they can, the entrance and the exits, if you can clamp down on what goes in and what goes out, and you can tag and make sure it's identified, you can do most of what you need to. So I think that's the approach they're going to take. Longer run, I think you've got to be careful of assuming that everything you do can't be tracked and that there won't be a potential post-event backwards retrograde taxation or even capital gains that could be levied on people, just because tax extraction is what control structures try to do.